You're good to go.
Okay, well, I'm hoping this is going to be a lighthearted, fun debate. So yeah, I mean, let's just get started. The proposition tonight is, does God exist? I will be responding in the affirmative. So my first argument tonight will be the prime mover argument, and it goes something like this: change, or as the ancients like to call it, motion, is evident to the senses, or it's a real feature of the world. When I wave my hand up and down, that's a change. When I move my cup, that's a change. If I change my underwear, that's a change, and so forth. Change is a real feature of the world. Change is something that actually goes on. And so we can say that, for reasons I can get into a bit later, that change involves the actualization of potential, right? When I in any change I think of, if I move my hand up and down, that's a change. If I pick up my cup, that's a change. We could say that's an actualization of potential. So my cup was potentially down, and now I'm actually drinking my cup. My hand was potentially in my face, and now it's actually in my face, and so on. It's an actualization of the potential. And so we have these real potentials within these various different things of everyday experience. And so we can also say that change requires a changer, or that nothing goes from potential to actual except by something actual. It can't obviously be something potential, because something potential is just that. It's only potential. It's not something actual, which can actually cause something. So either, so if change is nothing, if change is the actualization of potential, either the cause has potential itself, or it's purely actual, it has no potential. If the cause has potential, then it would require a cause for itself. And so this would require if the cause requires potential for itself, that cause would require potential, and so on. And this would be what's known as a hierarchical causal chain. Again, I can get all of that stuff later. I don't want to use too many technical terms if people aren't familiar with them. That would be a hierarchical causal series, and this would either regress infinitely or terminate in a first member. And it can't it can't regress infinitely, because each member is deriving its causal power from the other member. And so if there's no first member, no member of the chain would have any potential at all. And so it must terminate in a first member. This everyone calls God. And so the question is, and this is also known as the gap problem, what exactly are the attributes of this being? For example, does it have omniscience? Does it have omnipotence? The traditional attributes of the Christian, Jewish, Islamic God, the God of classical theism, of course. We know that, for example, the first cause must have a mind, since the only immaterial things we know of are abstract objects in mind. Since the first cause is immaterial, it must have a mind, since abstract objects are not personal, they do not have a mind. It must be omnipotence. It must have omnipotence, because its power can't be perfected or improved. Like I said, it doesn't have any potential, so it can't be further actualized. It can't be perfected anyway. It must be omnibenevolent, since it lacks potency. It's fully actual, hence its goodness can't be perfected. Again, can't improve in any way. So the next argument I would make is the Neoplatonic argument, and it's very similar to the Neoplatonic. The Neoplatonic argument is very similar to the prime mover argument, where you have things of everyday experience. I have this cup, I have this chair, I have my keys. These things are made of different parts. So the question is, well, what causes these parts to come together? If it has these various different parts, if I have this pen, which has these various different properties, it's white, it's blue, etc., it's shaped in the way it is, what causes the parts of the pen, or any object of everyday experience, to come together to form the whole? And so the question is, the cause that causes these parts to come together, is that object itself composite? And if not, then what causes, or if it is, then what causes its parts to come together, and so on? And again, we run into the causal chain problem again. So each member derives its causal power from the other member. Each member actualizes the other member, or puts its parts together. This would require a first member, since, like I said, the causal series cannot infinitely regress, and so on. So yeah, since we have a first member of the causal series, which has no parts, it's not composite, and so on, can't be composed of act and potency, for example. Going back to the prime mover argument, can't be composed of essence and existence, and so on. So we have a first member which has no parts, it has no potency, it's immutable, it's it's not, and like I said, it would have omnipotence, it would have omniscience, because of the fact that it would not be composed of active potency. And as I showed previously, if the first cause is purely actual, it must have those various attributes. Finally, we come to the rationalist proof. We find explanations wherever we look for them. If I'm walking in the forest one day and I run into a glowing bulb, I'm not just gonna say that this bulb is just a brute fact. I must investigate further. Explanations are the backdrop of all everyday experience, scientific inquiry, etc. Thus, it's safe to say that most, if not all things we know of, have explanations. And so to just arbitrarily assert that some things might just lack an explanation seems a bit arbitrary. And furthermore, if it were just the case that certain things just lack explanations, what's to say that my cognitive faculties don't just happen to lack an explanation? Maybe my experiences are just happening for no reason. In which case you can't defend against skeptical scenarios, and that's a heavy bullet to bite. So I think it's safe to say that in general, we find explanations wherever we look for them. I think that's a very inductive principle. And so we can reasonably say that all things, given our experiences, have explanations. And so if it's safe to say that all things, or at least most things, because people would say, oh, well, just because some things have explanations doesn't mean that all things have explanations. Like I said, I think that's a little bit arbitrary and ad hoc. I think in general, if we're going to say that most things have an explanation, it would be pretty arbitrary to just say, well, maybe some things don't have an explanation. So I would say, I think we're on good grounds to hold to the PSR and say that all things have an explanation. So either if things are explained by different things, we have if given our experience things have explanations, either something is contingent or necessary, and if it's contingent, it must be explained by something else. If it's necessary, it doesn't require an explanation.
1 minute.
Oh, sorry, I might pass my time.
No, 1 minute.
Oh, 1 minute. Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you. Either if it's contingent, it must be explained by something else, and so forth. How is everything in total explained? Well, maybe we can appeal to an infinite series of other things to explain the contingent series. But then what explains that series and so forth? We must ultimately be left with some necessary explanation. I know my opponent was talking about the difference between contingent and dependent. We can get into that. I'm just using it in the sense of dependent, but if he wants to split hairs about that, that's fine. I could just say dependent. But the point is, since we have a first cause which is not dependent, it can't change, it can't have potency, it doesn't have parts, etc. And so, like I said, we're left with the first cause, the God of classical theism, a being which is not composite, which is simple, which is immutable, etc. And ad hoc, as Aquinas would say, ad hoc omnes intelligent deum, this everyone calls God. Thank you.
Thank you for the opening, Squiddy. Leophilius, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your timer here.
I'm ready to go.
You got 8 minutes.
So I don't know if I'll use all 8 of my minutes. I'm quite interested to get into to actually have the back and forth. So I'll just list a few general reasons why I think it's more probably true that God doesn't exist. The first one is just our understanding of both the anthropological and the historic development of religions and the God concepts included thereof. We can see, based on region and time period, the way that religions have developed, the way that various God concepts have developed. And this seems to indicate that these are certainly fictions of the human mind. These aren't things that exist in reality. The ways that our culture and our environment have played on their development and on their structure as systems in society, religions, seems to imply that these are certainly features of human society and are not reflective of any real thing out in the world, one might say. So I think that goes not just for the religions, but for the God concepts thereof, amongst many other concepts and claims within religions that we could probably dismiss these as being non-real, as being fictional. Another reason why I generally think God probably doesn't exist is that there really isn't any explanatory import to the notion of God. I mean, God has frequently been cited as an explanation, but there doesn't seem to be any meat on the bones, so to speak, when it comes to how, or in virtue of what it is that God does any explaining. At best, I get like, well, his will, but that doesn't really tell me anything. That just sounds almost like magic. God wills for things to happen and then they just do. So I think that God, as a general concept, lacks a lot of explanatory import, and I think that makes it at least for notions of God where God is supposed to interact with the world or have created the world, I think God lacks explanatory import. If one wants to argue that maybe God created the world but doesn't interact with it. At that point, then I just think the God concept is superfluous to the point of dismissal. And one final reason is going to be that I think theism, just generally, theism is less parsimonious than naturalism, I think is a good way to put it. I don't have to suppose the existence of an entirely novel, fundamentally dissimilar ontology altogether to explain the ontology that I do know exists. I can just appeal to that ontology. So I think that that's just a much simpler, much parsimonious way to go about trying to understand the world, is just trying to understand the world for what it is without having to assume these extra ontologies that are themselves at best esoteric and at worst completely ill-defined in order to account for the reality, again, that I know is there. So just a general overview of a few reasons why I think gods probably don't exist. And I guess I'll leave it there.
Perfect. Thank you. But let's have a good, clean debate here. Let's try to avoid the low blows. I get it gets kind of heated sometimes, but we're all just idiots trying to seek the truth. So try to keep that in mind when y'all are having your conversation, right? With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Y'all have an hour whenever y'all are ready. Are y'all both ready to get engaged in the open discussion portion?
Of course.
I've actually seen some of your stuff, and you brought up like the problem of evil. So I was expecting you to bring that up, but it's fine. If you obviously, that's not like what you brought up in your opening statement. You brought up a couple of reasons. Cultures and religions have developed, lacks explanatory import. Theism is less parsimonious. Like, just curious on the third point. What would you think about what I brought up in my opening statement, namely that theism explains change in the world, composition, and just general explanations for things?
Well, I would just wonder why I would need to appeal to theism to explain those.
Well, for the reasons I gave, namely that if change occurs, change involves the actualization of a potential, or change requires a changer. If change requires a changer, there must be some, or change involves the actualization of potential, however way you want to put it, then there must be some cause which requires something to go from potency to act. And then that cause must either have potential or it's purely actual. And if not, there's a hierarchical causal series, which either terminates the first member or infinitely regresses. It can't infinitely regress. So it must have a first cause. And I can get in, I've explained why it has the various attributes of the traditional theism, such as omniscience, omnipotence, omnibenevolence. So, I mean, I think it's like a deductive argument where you must appeal to theism, because otherwise, there's no way to explain change, and it must involve a first cause, which has these various attributes.
Well, I take it that change occurs in space-time. So if we're talking about change, in my mind, we're talking about space-time. I would just root change in the dynamicity of mass energy momentum in space-time. So I don't know why I need to appeal to actuality or potentiality or gods or even an entirely different ontology to account for what changes.
Okay. Would you say that change involves going from non-being to being?
No. I don't know what it means to go from non-being to being. If something doesn't have being, then it doesn't get being.
Okay. If something doesn't have being, then it doesn't get being. Right. So
yeah.
For example, when any change occurs, right, you would say it's not going from non-being to being.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Right. So is change occurring at all? Is it actual change, or are things just rearranging? How would you cash that out?
Are you asking me like what I think change is?
Not exactly. I'm just wondering if you believe that change is like real. Like, for example, when I break this cup.
Yeah, I think change is real.
Okay, so if change is real and it's not going from being to non-being, and it's also there's some real difference. It seems like there's something within the object beforehand that remains the same afterward. That would
sure.
Be right. So that you'd agree that there are
conserved quantities.
Okay, I mean, that seems like you're just kind of redefining the idea, or not redefining, but you're just talking about potentials just in a different way.
Well, I suppose I don't know what you mean by potentials there, but yeah, if there's something that remains invariant under some form of space-time transformation that we call change, that would just be conserved quantities. This is very well defined in physics, actually.
Yeah, and you would say that's real, right? That's a real feature of thing.
Yeah. Like electric charge is a conserved quantity. Electric charge is real.
Okay, sure, but specifically the conserved quantities, however you want to call it, these are real features of the object. Otherwise, you couldn't have change at all. It would just be going from non-being to being, or change would
Yeah,
occur.
electric charge is a real physical feature of an electron.
Okay, well, I'm not specifically talking about electric charge. I was just
Yeah,
specifically.
I'm using that just as an example of some sort of conserved quantity in some object, like electric charge in an electron.
Great. Okay, so would you say that something going from, I would call it potency to act. If you could call it something different, that's fine. But something going from whatever the one state to another, is there something causing that to go from one state to another? Is there something causing that to happen?
I suppose in most instances, yeah, you could say there's going to be some sort of causal relation between events undergoing change in spacetime.
Okay, great. So if there's something causing it, either this thing itself can change, in which case it would also require an explanation, or there would just be an infinite regress. How would you go about it? Because if something changes and requires a change or something to cause it, then there would be something else to cause it, and so on. And so seems like it's an infinite regress would be unavoidable there. What road would you take?
Well, I don't see why you couldn't have something that changes, but is like there isn't anything below that level, like some sort of fundamental level. There could be change in the fundamental level, but it's still a fundamental level. I don't see what would be inconsistent with that.
Change in the fundamental level. I'm not sure what you mean there. Could you elaborate?
So an example would be I take quantum fields to be fundamental to reality, brutally contingent fundamental entities. I think quantum fields change. In fact, I think they intrinsically change. But I still take them to be fundamental. I don't think there's something causing quantum fields to change. I think it's an intrinsic feature of quantum fields.
Well, then you'd be saying
they will fluctuate over time.
Yeah, if you're saying that change occurs, but there's nothing which causes it to change, that would be something going from being to something going from non-being to being, right? There's something which is not existent, and it's not. There's nothing.
The field would exist in this particular instance,
right? So you'd say, okay, but then basically,
the potential of the field would just change over time. Very, very.
Okay, great. Does the field change? Is it prone to change, or?
Well, I would argue that quantum fields just change intrinsically. The sort of the quantum fluctuations most people would know them as. That these are just intrinsic fundamental changes
but
in the field.
Well, the only way to
more in the field's potential,
like one part. Okay, well, I'm sure you're using like potential in like a more physical sense, but yeah, if one part of the, like, let's say it would seem like the only way to understand that would be like one part of the field under like changing the other part, in which case that's still change is left unexplained, because then what would like the part that's being, I mean, would you agree that like you'd have to have one part of the field changing another, otherwise you don't have change in this instance?
Well, I mean, not if the change is intrinsic. It would, if
but
it were given
what
an
exactly
explanation, it would be explained by uncertainty. There are transient fluctuations in quantum fields at their vacuum state as a result of uncertainty.
The result of uncertainty. I mean, would that just be like unexplained? Would it just be a brute fact, or how?
That would probably just be some brutally contingent fact about quantum fields, in my view.
Yeah. Would that have like some causal explanation to it, or that contingent?
I don't think that would be cashed out in terms of causal language. No.
But does it have the ability to change?
I mean, I think that it's meaningful to call it to call the fluctuations changes. I think you could call them that.
Okay.
I mean, brute contingencies.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean that there are a couple of issues with that, because if you're just going to ultimately claim that like, well, maybe this is just how fields behave, they just change on their own. I mean, doesn't that kind of go against the whole principle behind scientific inquiry, where we look for explanations for things, and we don't just claim that things just have like brute facts or whatever, or just they're ultimately unexplained. That's just my problem.
I don't think the endeavor of science is to explain things.
That's just a bit. I mean, I'm a bit confused by that, because
I think the endeavor of science is to develop theories that describe mechanisms.
Right, and those mechanisms explain phenomena, do they not?
I mean, yeah, explanation sort of falls out of what science is doing. Yeah, like explanation isn't like a thing out in the world.
Exactly. We're just kind of going back and forth on this issue. I don't know if you wanted to move on to something.
Yeah, we can move on. That's fine with me.
I was just gonna ask about you said lacks explanatory import. I was just wondering what exactly you meant by that.
While we're waiting for Leophilius to return.
Yeah, so what I mean is that I don't know what it is in virtue of God does any explaining as a concept. Like when we say that gravity explains why an apple falls, I can there are mechanisms that can be adduced as an explanation. It is in virtue of general relativity, or we don't even really have to go that far. You could just say Newtonian gravity, but more deeply general relativity and the mechanisms therein that are very well mathematically described and observationally confirmed that I can use to adduce an explanation for why apples fall. So that it would be in virtue of those physical mechanisms and our ability to capture them utilizing structures like mathematics or systems like mathematics that gravity does explaining. But what is it in virtue of that God does any explaining?
Well, I think in terms of God, of the explanatory power of positing a God, I think it would be in terms of like causal explanations, because you're talking about like scientific explanations. But I think it's a category area to say, well, God doesn't. I mean, unless you're saying that God doesn't explain anything in science, which I'm not sure if that's what you're claiming. But I think in terms of like explanatory power, I think God would have explanatory power in terms of like philosophical way. He there's causal explanations in the world, and I think God is the first cause in order to have any cause. Any causation, any change, any composition in the world at all. So I think in virtue of God's causal power, he's able to explain why the universe exists.
How do we know that God has causal powers?
From the arguments that I provided.
I don't see how.
Well, like I said,
Have we seen God cause things to happen in the world?
No, but we reason from effect to cause, right? We see effects within creation, and we reason that there's a creator, right? Just like I can see,
well, I see effects in creation, and I assume that there's some sort of underlying physical mechanism for them, which seems to have been the case in every instance where we've been able to find one.
Right, but I'm saying I think
I don't know of any causes that aren't physical. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. Well, regarding like causes, which I think the issue is that in terms of immaterial things, if we're talking about an immaterial cause, I think we're talking about abstract objects, for example. Abstract objects don't have any causal power, and I think that we would have to assume that. I think we'd have to assume if he has causal power, since the only things that we know of. Well, I mean, I assume you don't take it that the mind is, that the mind is immaterial, right?
I don't take it that there's anything that's immaterial.
Yeah, fair enough. I would assume you're like a physicalist, but and if we were to assume that minds aren't material, then the only immaterial things we would know of are abstract objects or minds, and it can't be an abstract object, since abstract objects don't have causal power. It must be a mind. But I think we're gonna probably disagree on whether or not minds are immaterial. So
yeah, this sounds an awful lot like a stage 2 Kalam argument, like what Craig would present, that when he performs a conceptual analysis on what kind of cause something like the physical reality would have to have, it's going to have to be clearly something non-physical, since it caused the physical. But we could think of abstract objects. There's one thing that's non-physical, but abstract objects don't stand in causal relation. So how could an abstract object cause physical reality? Well, if we could think of some sort of perhaps like non-physical mechanism or something like that, but if that mechanism were truly sufficient for the production of its effect, and the mechanism has existed eternally, then its effect would have been produced an eternity ago, and its effect would exist eternally. But as Craig says,
yes,
the effect hasn't existed eternally. So it seems that whatever caused physical reality, number one, has to be non-physical, and number two, has to be capable of it has to be both sufficient to produce its effect and have the ability to refrain from producing its effect, which just seems to imply it's something that has a will. But I think this takes a notion of causality that I wouldn't take. I struggle to understand what some form of non-physical causation would be.
Mm-hmm. Well, would you say it's like an essential property of things to like an essential feature of, let's say, causation, that it must be produced by something like physical? What is it like? What is it about something causing something else that requires it to be physical? Is it like what makes it what makes
Some
that an
sort of
essential property?
relation in space-time between events in space-time, that are processual or dynamic, and that there is some, transfer of, at least generally speaking, mass energy momentum between the events in the system.
Yeah, but why would that be necessary? Like, yeah, that is what we experience in the world, but I don't think just because we haven't seen something like non-physical cause something, because yeah, in everyday reality, obviously, or everyday experience, obviously, things that cause other things are physical, they exist in space, time, and so on. But I don't think that's like an essential feature of things, because if we have good reasons to think that there is a non-physical cause, I don't see any what's the word? I don't see it as necessary that it would be not physical as opposed to non, that it would have to be physical as opposed to non-physical.
I take causation to be mechanistic. I don't know what a non-physical mechanism is.
Okay, well, what about like so you wouldn't believe in like mental causation?
No, I don't know what that's supposed to be. That is just a form of physical causation, because I take the mind to be physical.
Okay, well, fair. I mean, my point is just that I think if we have reasons to think that there is a non-physical cause, then I don't see it as impossible that it would be non-physical and still have causal powers and so on. But
I'm not like opposed to the idea of a non-physical causation. I'm just not sure what would be referred to there. And if there aren't like some sort of example that one could pull, it's more that it just seems, I struggle to make sense. It would be like saying a non-physical object having color. I don't know what that means, because color is a physical thing. Color is what you get when electromagnetic radiation is scattered off of an object, a macro scale object that's in frequency. So I don't know what it would mean for something non-physical and therefore not composed of electrons to have a color or a shape or a size or a weight. It's the same thing with causation. I don't know what it would mean to say that there are non-physical causes.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, oh yeah, right. So like the example of wave particle duality. Would you say that you can like fully understand like how that works, or as just as an example?
Wave particle duality? Yeah, wave particle duality. Well, so in physics, everything is waves all the time. We can just reduce that waviness to a point where we can just assign some given number to the object and say, yeah, that this is the position or the momentum.
Okay.
But technically, particles are waves and are always.
You wouldn't
waves.
say
We call them particles when that waviness has been collapsed around a single value or close to it.
Right. So you wouldn't say it's like unexplainable or anything?
I not immediately, at least, no.
Okay. I know according to some interpretations of quantum physics or quantum mechanics, however you want to put it, that wave particle duality is like not really comprehensible or anything. But if you hold to like a model that can explain it, then I was just trying to make an example of like just like something like being incomprehensible to us might not necessarily mean it doesn't exist. I know you're not claiming that something can like non-physically cause something, but I'm just saying that I think the idea that it like might not make sense or might not be comprehensible wouldn't necessarily be like an argument against position, since there are plenty of things within our reality that we don't fully comprehend.
Sure.
But
for me, yeah. I would just say, like those things that exist in reality that we don't fully comprehend, for me to understand or rather comprehend some form of non-physical causation, I would just need somebody to give me an analysis of what that is.
I'd just like to comment on the first argument you made that the way is different, like culture and religions have developed.
Mm-hmm.
So do you not see it as like well, how could you like go into that a little bit actually? Like how do you understand like the way religions like you would say that like God was just like some sort of mechanism that like for like various oh shoot, I think I'm losing connection. Would you say it's like it was just like a coping mechanism for like various different cultures of like explaining certain things like lightning or whatever? I know that's a common argument or
I don't know if I would use the terms coping mechanism. I think there's some truth to this idea that God sort of arose out of this need, this evolutionary need, for humans to sort of associate agency with things. I'm not sure that's the full picture on why humans have concepts like God or like religions. I think it plays. Thank you. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Dude, thank you. Jesus
Professor
Christ.
Hizzle donated $20 and says relief for Leophilius. Remember, you can super chat to
Oh,
cancel
Lord.
that as well by matching.
I'm not putting it back on. I'm sorry, Taco. I'm not putting
It's
that
the
one
rules,
back on.
Leophilius.
But I'm not sure that that's like the full picture. I think that there's probably a lot of cultural influences that played a part in the continued development of religion. But I would view things like religion and God concepts like, say, economics and money. Like they might be real in the sense of their import to our society and our culture as a species, but they're not like real things out there in the world. Like if humans didn't exist, these things wouldn't exist. They're sort of invented by humans to serve some purpose or set of purposes, perhaps.
like psychological need.
I think that
some
plays
like psychological need or something.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a psychological element to it all. I think religions, including gods and concepts like miracles and martyrs and martyrism, all the associated concepts. I think that these are I think there's a cultural bent to them, a psychological bent to them, an evolutionary bent to them. And so I think if this is the case, and this seems to be strongly indicated by both anthropology and I think just looking at history and the historical development of religions, it seems to be the case that this just makes the idea of gods as actual things in the world, actually existing entities, I think improbable.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, a couple things. I mean, firstly, would you not say that like given just looking at that, you could say, okay, well, yeah, the idea of God or gods just arose out of certain needs of different people with the different cultures. But could you not see that as like, well, maybe Christianity or the Christian worldview could explain that data equally well and just say that, well, no, I mean, people had that desire, they had that innate disposition toward God, namely because God, as Paul says in Romans 1, wrote the law in all of our hearts. Would you not say that explains the data equally well?
I don't know if I would say it explains it equally as well. Christianity might serve as some sort of explanation. But for me, the idea that humans developed this idea of God, namely because God exists, we are created by him, almost seems a little, what's the term, post hoc? Is that the term I'm looking for? And I think that since a variety of aspects from psychology and anthropology and what have you can be used to explain the development of religions and of God concepts, to suppose that we have them because of God just seems a little bit superfluous. Like it's adding extra stuff to what we already have that doesn't make what we already have any better in terms of explaining anything.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I would say that I think given the reasons that we have for believing in God that discussed and obviously disagree with, but I think given those reasons, I think you could have just explained it easily well that, God writes the law in all of our hearts, the desire to, seek a relationship with God and so on. And you could interpret that just by looking at it. You can interpret it either way. I mean, you could say, well, maybe God exists and, he wrote the law on all of our hearts, or maybe just, people just desire to worship God. I don't really think it I don't know if that would go in either direction if you're just looking at what it was.
Well, so I think with respect to that, there's going to be a lot of other reasons I would say that are going to overdetermine the non-existence of God. Some of them I've cited already. So I just it doesn't. I don't need to use God really in any respect. I think to understand reality, I don't think supposing God helps. Like it doesn't better explain electromagnetism. It doesn't better explain plate tectonics. I don't think it better explains anything. So at that point, I think it's a superfluous concept, and I think that in and of itself is a reason to suppose that it's probably a concept that's not very meaningful.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, I would say, and I think you're just kind of looking at like sort of a scientific sort of point of view, in which case, I mean, I didn't give any scientific arguments. I was specifically appealing to, our experience of change, composition, explain, and I think there's sufficient reason there to conclude that there is a God. But obviously, you disagree with that, and that's fine. We've discussed that. I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on, like, for example, like, let's say, I don't know, fine tuning. Like, would you say that? How would you go about like?
Well, so I don't.
And obviously, you wouldn't say fine tuning, but you would say, like, yeah, the physical constants and so on being these precise measurements.
So I don't think that physical reality is finely tuned. I think that our physical theories about reality are finely tuned. And at that point, it's clear who finely tuned them. We did. And we did because they are largely incomplete theories.
Okay. But isn't that based on like how the like gravitational pull, for example, we didn't like determine the number, right? It was a measurement that physicists made.
Well, I think
based
the
on
number is going to be some sort of conceptual feature that's a part of our mathematical schema that we associate to some observation we make in reality. I don't take numbers to be things that exist in the world.
Yeah, but isn't that based on some actual measurement? I mean, obviously, it's not gonna like obviously
we measure gravity.
There's a number 2.15 lying around somewhere, but
so like let's take the speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second. That's the speed of light. That is how fast a photon moves. But the way that I expressed what that value is made up by humans. What it's associated to actually exists. Why it is way is largely going to be explained by the structure of space-time and its ability to permit an electromagnetic field to propagate through it. And I just think that's just the way the reality is.
Would you say that's a random? That's a random process, or it's a?
No, I don't think it's random.
Okay, you'd say it's like a necessary. It's just a necessary process.
No, I would say it's barely contingent. I think most of the fundamental constants and parameters of reality that there isn't any. This is the way reality is, and this is what it does. And as agents extended within it with perceptual capabilities and the ability to abstract and think and conceptualize, we have developed systems that we use to better understand and quantify the reality that we reside within. But there isn't any explanation for, at least fundamentally, why reality is the way that it is. It just is. That's just the way that it is, and we can discover it being that way.
Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on this quote from physicist Paul Davies? He says, even if the laws of physics were unique, it doesn't follow that the physical universe itself is unique. The laws of physics must be augmented by cosmic initial conditions. There is nothing in present ideas about laws of initial conditions remotely to suggest that their consistency with the laws of physics would imply their uniqueness. Far from it. It seems that the physical universe does not have to be the way that it is. It could have been otherwise. So, and what he seems to be saying is that even if, the physical constants and so on are just like explained like by some necessary thing or whatever, that wouldn't entail that the, as he says, the initial conditions are necessary. And so that kind of seems to like push the problem back. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure that I would say that we really know what the initial conditions for the universe were, or if that's even a meaningful question to ask, if there are initial conditions. But when we look at the initial conditions, if we're speaking in the language of fine-tuning, then the initial conditions would certainly be overly finely tuned. You don't need to start out in as low entropy a state as the universe did to get a universe that looks like ours. You can get a universe that looks like ours today. Without starting in as low of an entropy state, even remotely as low of an entropy state as the universe started out in.
Okay.
But yeah, I would grant that reality fundamentally is brutally contingent. It could have been otherwise, but it's not.
Yeah, but then how? So you wouldn't say that the physical constants are necessary, then, would you?
Nope. I mean, they might be necessary in
Right.
some
So
gnomic way, perhaps. I'm not committed to a view like that, but there are some that might say that there's some sort of like gnomic necessity to certain features or structures in reality.
okay, but then so how? I'm sorry. Just how would you exactly explain constants then?
I just think that these are fundamental features of the world. That's just the way the world is. That's just how fast photons move in the vacuum of space. That there isn't something that, to at least as far as we know, there isn't anything that tells us why that is. That is just the fundamental structure of the world.
So you're just okay. So these like these constants, which even if they were slightly different, would not permit life. You're just saying that it just couldn't. It just is that way.
Yeah. Well, to me, I don't care whether the constants would permit life. Just like I don't care if they would permit protons or black holes or quarks or anything else.
So, but you do not.
If you
find
change
out,
the constants, you could make reality look a lot of different ways. In fact, there could be an infinite number of ways that you could make reality look by changing the constants from negative infinity to infinity. And then if that were the case, then there would probably be an infinite amount of worlds in which you could get life. But if there were a God, I don't suppose a God would need to fine-tune a reality for life. He could just make life. He doesn't even need a reality to do it.
He wouldn't. Well, he wouldn't need reality because there would have to be some dimension or whatever you want to call it.
Some sort of spiritual beings, which we supposedly already are. That to me begs the question, in the informal usage of that, of why then create a physical? Why not heaven now? Why didn't God just create us all happy with Him in heaven? Why create a reality and give us the opportunity to sin and do evil and all of this when we could have all just been happy in heaven with God? And it would have been great.
Oh, that kind of gets into the issue of
that might push a little bit into a specific religion. I don't mean to do that if it does.
Right. No, it's fine. And no, I think we're like running out of time, but that's fine. I was actually expecting you to bring that up because I've seen some of your stuff and you've debated the problem of evil and so on.
There's 36 minutes left.
Just
right
there's 36 minutes left. Okay. I mean, I don't know if you wanted to discuss it. I don't know if you want to discuss that a little bit, but just going back to the fine tuning thing real quick. I just want to make it clear. So do you not think that it's incredibly improbable for the constants to have the values that it does? And I know you said that the values themselves are like man-made or whatever, just humans assigned like a concept. I'm saying the constants behind the values, right? Do you not find it incredibly improbable that it would have the values that it does to permit life?
I don't see why it would be any more probable or improbable than them having literally any other value that they could have from negative infinity to infinity. I don't think there's something that picks out values for what the constants and parameters of reality are. I think they are what they are. We can discover them. We have discovered them, and we have assigned various mathematical what's the word I'm looking for? Mathematical concepts, you might say, to them to use them in models to help explain things.
But don't physicists say that if the constants were even slightly different, that the universe would not be life permitting?
Sure. I don't see why anything turns on whether the universe permits life or not.
Sorry, that kind of sounds like it goes against your claim, like earlier, where you stated that if they could have been any value from like 0 to infinity. I don't know if that's exactly what you said, but
well, they could have. I think they could have been any value, and I don't think that the values that we observe them to have are any more probable or less probable than any of the other values they could have had. Like, I don't
doesn't that go against
values that were improbable, and so this means that there must have been some agent that wanted us and specifically picked out the value that's going to allow for life, which seems to put restrictions on that sort of being omnipotent. I would think if it's omnipotent, it doesn't need to pick out specific values. It can just do what it wants, so long as it's logically consistent, at least.
Well, God could have made the constants. He could have made some other constant life. There's nothing stopping him.
And he could have made life under those constants, I think. I don't think that God would be restricted by any sort of gnomic structure of reality.
Well, yeah, but that would require some like supernatural. That would require some like supernatural a thing. Whereas you're saying talking just naturally, I don't think that's possible, right? It couldn't have. I mean, I don't think any. The point is that physicists, according to physicists, the constants couldn't have been. They were even slightly off, then the universe wouldn't be life permitting. But it seems like you're going against what they say when you say it could have been any value.
Well, I think most physicists would say, yeah, I mean, it could the universe could have taken on a lot of different values, but it didn't. It has the ones that it has.
I'm not entirely sure about that, because I'm pretty sure that
physicists
I have to get a quote, but
most physicists and most philosophers both take fine tuning to just be brutally contingent. I mean, you could take that for what you think it's worth. That
well, that's how they explain it, but I'm saying specifically. Yeah, that's how they explain it. But I'm saying with regards to like the constants themselves, I'm fairly certain that their view is that, at least with regards to most physicists or a great deal of them, that the constants couldn't have been any other way. That if it was like, let's just say, and I'm just making this up, 1.6 instead of 1.5, then, or even more precise than that, like 1.0001 instead of like 1.0002 or whatever, then the universe wouldn't be life permitting. That seems to be the view of modern physicists, but you seem to be disagreeing.
Yeah, no. If you change the values,
so you disagree with like
various constants and parameters by very small amounts, life as we understand it, at the very least, would cease to exist. I just don't think anything turns on that.
Right, but I'm saying that I think that requires or that at least cries out for an explanation how vastly improbable that would be. That would be like if I won the lottery like 100 times, probably even more improbable than that.
I don't know if we can. I don't know what. I guess it all depends on the priors one's conditionalizing upon, but I don't know how we really assign like the probability to these things. I think that there's a lot of there's a lot of work to be done there. I don't think that, not that you're necessarily citing this person or their presentation of this argument, but just as an example, like people like Luke Barnes who try to assign probabilities to all this stuff, I think that they're quite hasty with doing so, and a lot of the priors they use I don't agree with.
Okay, that's fair enough. I'm trying to remember exactly how they like calculate this and stuff, because I looked into this like 2 months ago, but I can't even remember. But yeah, I mean, I do think that regardless, I think that the position of physicists like Brian Davies and others, Brian Davies or Paul Davies, no, I think it's Paul Davies, not Brian Davies. Brian Davies is, but anyways, their position is vastly improbable for the universe to have these conditions. As far as like how they calculate that, I can't exactly remember, but I know that they do say it is improbable. I have to find a quote. I think I have something here.
I think if one of your priors is that you want life to exist, then when you look over the space of probabilities for the constants and parameters of the universe, the ones that allow for life as we understand it are extraordinarily small, and thus the probability that any universe would take on those values would be very, very small. But again, that's assuming the prior that like life is some intended goal, and I don't have that prior. I don't think life is any sort of intended goal. I think life is merely a result of the thermodynamic processes of this reality.
Right, you're just saying it's random, but then in that case,
I don't know if I would say it's random.
Okay,
I think maybe there's stochasticity plays a part in it, but I think that there are a lot of deterministic processes that led to the development of life. In fact, I think most of the processes, not all.
Okay, I think that
probably deterministic, at least at the macromolecular scale. Once you start getting down to the molecular and the atomic scale, I think stochasticity might play, this idea of randomness might play a little bit more of a role.
Okay, didn't you say earlier that
stochastic at the scales?
Didn't you say earlier that you believe that they're like there are these brute contingencies, or that these constants are brute contingencies? So I mean, now you're sort of saying that like there's these deterministic processes which play a role.
Yeah, I think the fundamental constants of reality are brutally contingent. I think reality fundamentally is brutally contingent, and I think that what emerges out of that, at least the classical scale of reality, is a set of is our deterministic mechanisms and processes. Yeah, I think Newtonian, I think classical physics is deterministic. Quantum physics is to some extent deterministic, even. But yeah, that doesn't mean I don't take the fundamental level of reality to be brutally contingent.
Yeah, I'm just kind of so you're saying it seems like you're both sorry, maybe I missed something, but it just kind of seems like you're saying it's like both brutally contingent and yet somehow deterministic.
Well, I don't
at
think
the same time.
reality
So
is determined. I think that there are mechanisms in reality that are deterministic, which is just to say that if I've got the initial conditions and I can do calculus, I can figure out what the system is doing at any time.
okay,
If I
yeah,
know
I mean,
how
you can
fast the
calculate
car is moving and I know the distance between 2 points, I can figure out when it's going to go from one point to the next. It's deterministic.
right, yeah. Okay.
I don't have to worry
Of-
about the car randomly shooting off 1,000,000 miles that way at the speed of light and then shooting back and then going to its destination. That's I mean, I don't. That's not going to happen. I don't
right,
have to
but
worry
that's
about
yeah,
that.
but that's isn't that
It will go
specifically
from A to B at that speed over that time, and I can determine that
right,
before the car even gets there.
right, but that's specifically talking about something that's determined by the laws of physics, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Velocity
saying.
and-
It's deterministic. It's determined by laws of
yeah,
nature. It's determined by the fundamental structure of reality. But the fundamental structure of reality is not determined by anything. It is
right,
most
but I don't
literally
think
just is the way that it is.
I don't think physicists would claim that the physical constants of the universe are determined by laws of nature, would they? Or
No, they would factor into laws of nature. Fundamental constants and parameters either are going to be laws of nature or are going to factor into laws of nature.
right, but they themselves, the constants, wouldn't be like determined.
No,
At least,
no, I don't think
right,
so.
right. So yeah, I mean, I think that we're still left with the problem of okay, if you have these constants and they're even slightly off, that life wouldn't be permitting, and we know physicists do say that it's vastly improbable that the universe would have these values. Yeah, it kind of seems like
I mean, improbable things happen all the time.
okay. Yeah, all I was saying was that I think if physicists are saying that these like physical constants aren't necessary and that they could be slightly off, and that if they were slightly off, like universe wouldn't be life permitting. And it's just what I was saying earlier, that I think it's vastly improbable, as they say, that, and I think that's something to be explained. I think it would be, it's almost miraculous that we even have life in the universe. So that's my issue. I think am I cutting in?
Yeah, I just this idea that the constants are people say the constants are finely tuned. That's one discussion. And maybe I could grant that, it depending on what's meant by fine tuning. But when people say that they're finely tuned for life, is where I have a problem. Black holes form way easier in reality. In fact, at some point in reality, it will be nothing but black holes. Why am I not justified in saying that reality is actually finely tuned for black holes?
Is it so? How unlikely would it be given like certain constants? I don't. Certain constants in the universe, right? Would you say that like it's incredibly unlikely that we have black holes? That it's improbable that black holes
So
would? Or?
you think fine tuning is given based on unlikelihood?
Okay. Yeah, it's incredibly unlikely that black holes would form. Is that like a thing? Like, would physicists say that?
No, I think it's more likely that black holes would form than that life would form.
It's more likely that.
And so it seems that the sort of purpose of the universe isn't to develop life, which I find funny because a lot of theists. I'm not saying this of you. I don't know if you believe this, but a lot of theists think that the natural world can't even develop life on its own. That life requires some sort of supernatural intervention, and then turn around and say that reality is finely tuned for life. I've always found that. Again, I'm not saying that you're saying this, but I've always found that interesting. But yeah, I think that if the universe can more easily create black holes, then it seems that the purpose of the universe is more attuned to the creation of black holes than it is the development of life.
Yeah, well, I don't think necessarily the fine-tuning argument is saying that the purpose of the universe is to like permit life, rather just that there are certain conditions that are vastly improbable that do permit life. So it's not. I don't think the
Yeah.
claim is that. Yeah, yeah, and
I
the
mean, I
point is
can
just
grant that they're vastly improbable, but that's just with respect to like specifically life. And that improbability is only going to be a result of the fact, number one, that life already developed, and number two, we've seen that it requires a variety of complex layers and extremely well-developed layers to exist in physical reality. And the more complex, the more well-structured these various levels and scales are, and the structures and processes within them become, the more improbable that they're going to become. But I don't think that necessarily bears on whether or not they do happen.
Yeah, but isn't the fine-tuning argument concerned with like the preconditions for those, or like the preconditions for those conditions for life to form? Like
I think so. I just, for me, whether or not life specifically is improbable given this sort of gnomic structure of reality, I just don't think anything turns on that fact.
I see. Well, as far as fine-tuning goes, I don't know if we're going to get any further than what we already said. I mean, I don't want to repeat myself on that. Is there anything else we want to discuss? Because we sort of discussed your various points about theism being less parsimonious, lacks explanatory import, ways culture and religions have developed. How much time do we have left, Taco?
13 minutes.
13 minutes. Did you want to? So I know you brought up something about evil, or not. Well, you specifically brought up something about why would God like create a universe instead of like what with sin and all that, and why wouldn't he just
Why
like,
not heaven now?
right? I think there are a couple of reasons why God wouldn't. I mean, wouldn't God want people to freely come to him if he's just going to create beings and who have no free will, which and that would include morally significant free will, the free will to commit evil? Would that not be would that not, if in other words, if God just determined, okay, you can't commit evil or whatever, and you, that would sort of mean, or at least choosing between rejecting God or accepting him and choosing a relationship with him, wouldn't that require creatures to have morally significant free will to choose evil and to say, no, I'm not going to believe in you or whatever, and I'm going to commit evil and murder or whatnot, disobey your commands and so on? Wouldn't that require like morally significant free will, in which case you would have to create a world in which evil might exist?
Well, there's two answers to that. The first one is I don't know why creatures necessarily would need to have morally significant free will. I don't see why that would really be that important to God. But so supposing that it was, I think it's possible that God could create a world in which there are agents like ourselves that have morally significant free will, and we freely choose, and I can even grant libertarianly freely choose to always do the good. I don't think there's
But,
anything logically inconsistent with such a world. And
well,
then the
how would
question
God
just
dictate?
is that world better than this one?
How would God dictate the actions of free creatures? How would he dictate that they're not going to commit evil?
He's not dictating. They're freely choosing to never do evil.
They're in all possible worlds?
No, in the particular possible world I'm talking about. It is a possible world in which there are rational moral agents like ourselves that possess morally significant free will. Again, I can grant even in the libertarian sense of free will. And all of these agents at all instances libertarianly freely choose to never do evil. I think that's an entirely logically possible
That
world.
seems kind of
And
contradictory. So
then again, the question is that world better than this one?
well, how would God determine that? Or how would it? How
God
would
is
these
doing no
behave?
determining. We're
Right,
libertarianly
let me
freely
not say determine.
choosing to
Okay,
never do evil.
how could God guarantee that there is no possible world in which a creature doesn't do evil?
That's not what I'm saying. God isn't guaranteeing anything. This is a world in which
Right, but
all
then
the rational moral agents within that world freely choose to never do evil.
okay, is there a possible world? Let me just try to get this clear. There's no possible world in which they could commit evil.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a possible world in which they never do. Ever.
Yeah, that's correct. But we're in a
And what I'm asking
hypothetical.
is would such a world be better than this one? A world without
Would
the
such a world?
Holocaust and without
Sure, yeah,
murder.
yeah.
So then why didn't God just create that world? He's omnipotent, right? He can create any
Because
logically consistent state of affairs.
No, God only allowed the world that we are in because of our choices. He allowed us to make free choices, and because of that, we chose to eat from the apple. We chose to, or from the fruit. We chose to commit the Holocaust. We chose to do all these things. God allowed that because He wanted morally significant free will, and in order for there to be morally significant free will, that requires possibly certain possible worlds in which evil is committed.
Sure. But none of that is inconsistent with there being a world where there are rational moral agents who freely choose to never do evil.
That's true, but again,
And
there's
if that's
no way
the case, then that's just a logically consistent state of affairs. If it's better than this one, and God is morally perfect, God always seeks what's best. He would make the better world. Why didn't He make the better world?
In order for God to make that world, He would have to dictate the choices of free creatures. He would have to.
No, He wouldn't.
But how else would He create that world? And
by creating the world, and then the agents within the world freely choose to never do evil.
Except they never do. But what's determining that? What's determining that?
The free choice of the agents in the world.
The free choice. But how do you? They have the free choice to commit evil, though.
Yeah, but they just don't. They don't want to commit evil, so they don't.
Deciding they don't.
No, but they are. Like they're libertarianly free agents.
They don't have to do that. They have the free choice.
Yeah, this is just it just follows explicitly. This is a logically consistent state of affairs. Unless you take it that God's omnipotence does not entail that He can instantiate any logically consistent state of affairs, then I don't see why it would be a trouble for God to create such a world. Assuming that He is omnipotent, and then that means that He can instantiate any logically consistent state of affairs. And then if God is morally perfect, I just take that to mean that God always seeks what's best. And if this is a better world where better is some superlative form of the good, then it just follows that God would choose that world because it's better than this one.
Okay, but how could God create a world where, how could God have guaranteed that world existed? How could He have created that world?
Because He's omnipotent.
Okay, is it possible for Him to determine, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but is it possible for Him to determine the choices of free creatures?
I mean, perhaps in some way it might be. No, I mean, if somebody took like a compatibilist, I think if somebody took a compatibilist view, I don't think that would be consistent with the libertarian view of free will, but I think it would be with the compatibilist view. So I think it just depends on how one views free will.
Yeah, I don't know if you're talking about. I mean, for me, that just seems like a blatant contradiction. If you're talking about someone's actions being determined, then that's not free. For free seems to be.
Well, again, that just depends on your analysis of free will. I think that it is. In fact, I think that we are free agents, and that a lot of our decisions are determined by antecedent factors. We make decisions based on antecedent factors.
And real fast, there are a couple super chats, so I'm going to pull those up. Bartholomew Newton was asking, God could have made a world where evil didn't exist, but the choice to follow God or not still existed in another way. Why didn't He?
God could have made a world where evil didn't exist, but the choice to follow God or not still existed in some way. Well, if you're rejecting the choice to follow God, that would also involve the choice to reject God's commandments, like thou shalt not murder, etc. So, I mean, if you're able to commit evil and you're able to reject God, which would be an evil act, what's stopping you from committing other evil acts, right? I mean, it just seems like God would have to I mean, if you're rejecting God, then you could also reject other things that God commands, like thou shalt not murder and whatever, and then you could just do whatever you want, right?
Just a really quick clarifying question: do you hold to libertarian free will? I presume.
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I'm not too well read on that, on like the libertarian compatibilist distinction, but if you're talking about like compatibilism or determinism and free will are like consistent, that to me just doesn't make any sense. So I would suppose, yeah.
And Karen Dave also is asking, couldn't God make a world where people could choose evil but never have an opportunity or need to do so? That seems logically consistent and very easy for an omniscient, omnipotent being.
Exactly.
No.
There are so many ways God could have created the world that just like reduce the amount of evil. He could have created a world where literally the only way that it is different from ours is that one less Jew died in the Holocaust. That would be a world that's better than this one because one less Jew died in the Holocaust. So it's just like, why didn't one less Jew die in the Holocaust? And then if you grant, okay, so one less Jew could have, why not two? Why
Because of
not
human free
20?
will.
Why not
Because of human
100?
free
Why
will.
not just it not happen at all?
Because of human free will. Because we have morally significant
Well,
free
but the
will. and
thing
humans
is, so
decide
you're
to do
saying that it's
disgusting acts.
better that humans have free will to do evil than for God to step in and prevent humans from doing evil by violating their free will.
Well, there could be greater goods which come about in a fallen world where which come about due to evil acts. That's possible.
Well, but then all things considered, those evil things aren't really evil. They ought to occur, all things considered, because they conduce a greater good.
That seems to be like a more utilitarian view to say, like, if
No,
something has,
doesn't assume utilitarianism.
I think it does, because if you're saying,
No,
okay,
it does
well,
not assume utilitarianism.
it sounds like what you're saying is, okay, because an evil act resulted in a good result, therefore that act is actually good. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's saying that if some action X
Uh-huh.
conduces something that is desired Y, such that you can't get Y without doing X, and you want Y, then you ought to do X. What it means to say that something is good is that you ought to do it, all things considered. So if you ought to do X to get
No,
Y,
wait,
then X is
wait.
good. I don't know what it means to say that something is evil if you ought to do it.
Okay, I'll concede on this point.
Well, we can still do closing statements here, though.
Okay.
So, since y'all are both here, let me reset the timer here. Squiddy, since you were the affirmative, go ahead and do your closing statements, and then we'll have Leo do that. You've got 8 minutes starting now.
Yeah, I just think that throughout this debate, I think there were some inconsistencies on my opponent's part. I think that when it comes to science, again, I think we look for explanations for things. We look, explanations are just things about when we look out in the world, we generally look for explanations. And I think that, saying, like, talking about, like, oh, well, it could just be like a brute fact that, the change occurs and that just ultimately, like, some irreducible field or whatever he said. I think that what he was saying was that it's just a brute reality. I think that's inconsistent. It goes against the principle behind science, which says that we look for explanations for things. We don't just say it's a brute fact arbitrarily. I think that's a big I think that was a big problem on my opponent's part. And I think when he said theism is less parsimonious, I just think, well, no, I think it explains actually lots of things in our experience, like change, composition, contingency. And I wasn't even planning on bringing up fine tuning, but since he was, since he seems very scientific minded, I was like, okay, well, I'll just bring up the fine tuning in the universe. And I think his explanation for fine tuning, I think, was lacking because he basically bit the bullet and said, well, yeah, I mean, it just happens to be this way. And if I'm misquoting you, Leophilius, I apologize. You can correct me, but it just seemed like it, from what I heard, he was just saying, well, it just happens to be like this. Fine tuning, just the universe just happens to have these constants, and it's not necessary. It's not random. It's whatever. I was a bit confused on what he was saying there. I see that as extremely inconsistent because, again, when we look at, even in science, right, we don't say, okay, well, this phenomenon is just happening randomly. No, we say, well, there's a principle behind this, there are laws behind this. And, I gave the example of the lottery winner. If someone wins the lottery 1,000 times in a row, his response was a bit lacking. He was saying, well, it could have just been, I don't know what happened. I think it's clearly rigged. And I think in the case of the universe, I think there's clearly intention behind the constants of the universe being the certain way, being the way that they are. I do think that it's as physicists to say, I think it's highly improbable that the universe has these constants, and I think that the universe was designed for life, and I think that's pretty evident from given what we know. Lacks explanatory import. Again, I just think that given our experience, I think given various things of experience, I think it does have explanatory import. Regarding the ways that cultures and religions have developed and so on, I think you could look at that either way. I think that if you're assuming atheism, you might think, oh, well, these various cultures developed to have these different conceptions of God to fulfill some psychological need or to fulfill some desire. But I think you could also say, well, no, maybe it's an innate desire that creatures have to, worship God or whatever. To me, I don't think I think you could view it either way. And so I don't really see it as an argument for or against God, especially considering when you consider the evidence and the arguments for the existence of God. I think it's very powerful. And regarding where I think the arguments for the existence of God, I should say, are powerful. And I think they do ultimately make the other arguments that he brought up less convincing. Regarding the problem of evil, my whole issue was he was saying, well, God could have created a world where creatures freely choose to freely choose to commit good, and that's true. But it's also possible that he freely chose to commit a world where creatures freely choose to commit evil, and that's clearly the world we're living in, because obviously there's evil and so on. And that if I think that it's impossible for God to determine that or to create a world where they're guaranteed there'd be no evil, because creatures could freely choose to commit evil. They don't have to choose the good. And I think basically essentially what I heard him say was that creatures are and he didn't use the word determined, but it's what it sounded like was he was saying that creatures are determined to freely choose the good. And obviously he's not going to say, again, he's not going to use the word determined, but that's just kind of the implication of what I got. If God creates a world where creatures just always freely choose to commit good, then there's no way that God could have done that without dictating their actions, without dictating that they're going to not commit evil. And so I think in order to preserve morally significant free will, God would have to allow certain worlds in which there's evil, and that's the one we're living in. And so I think that's a sufficient answer. I was hoping, to be honest, I was hoping to get more into that, because actually that was like probably my favorite part of the debate. So I'm kind of sad that we didn't talk about that more, but that was actually the most enjoyable part. I enjoyed the discussion. Thank you, Leophilius. Thank you, Taco, for this discussion. It was pretty good. Sorry, I was a bit tired and didn't get much sleep. So if I felt like I wasn't very responsive, that's my bad. But anyways, yeah, good discussion.
Cool. Thank you. And then Leo, you have 8 minutes starting now.
Yeah, I just want to echo that sentiment. I think this was a really, really good discussion. It's nice to have discussions with people that, despite the fact that you disagree with them, that you can both sustain a competent and intellectually stimulating discussion on things that humans have been talking about for literally thousands of years. So I think everybody owes Squiddy, that's what it is. A round of applause for that, because as many people who frequent this channel know, we don't always get people like this that you can really have a good discussion with. So I just want to start with that. As for some of what we discussed, so to kind of round off some of my views on things and some of the points I was trying to make, just to really ensure that things are being understood. When it comes to things like change or causation, I just take these to be physical. I don't have any reasons, and I don't think I've been presented any good reasons to think that I need to suppose things beyond the natural ontology to understand or account for these things. Not saying that one couldn't do that, but then that's just on them to explain out their methodology to me and why it's a superior one. I think I don't think that's been done tonight. With respect to explanations, we didn't really get like into explanation as a subject, which is probably for the better, because that it's sometimes getting deep into stuff like that just muddies things more than it does help anybody. Explanation, both scientific explanation and just metaphysical explanation, are interesting. I suppose I was speaking more broadly about metaphysical explanation in this discussion. I used some examples from science, but I think broadly, even metaphysically speaking, I think theism lacks any real explanatory import as an idea. I just don't think it adds anything to what we have that better helps us understand reality in any ways that I think are not immediately superfluous or ill-defined. So I think that is, I definitely think that is problematic. With respect to fine tuning, I don't think there is something that explains it, because I don't think that there is fine tuning. My view is that fine tuning is a feature of the physical theories that humans have about reality and isn't some feature of reality itself. However, the gnomic structure, so to speak, the physical structure of reality, and the law-like structure and the parametric structure of reality, I think, at least at the fundamental level, and I think there is a fundamental level, I take that to just be brutally contingent. I don't I don't know what it would mean to call it necessary. I don't generally take necessity to be something that applies in that way. I take that to be probably something that, like, you might apply to propositions in deductive arguments or something. I'm not sure if necessity has much meaning when applied to the existence of things. Maybe it does, but I can't say I've heard any meaningful analysis of that, at least thus far. But I'm willing to change my mind on that. I don't see the big point that I like to make is that I don't think that I have good reasons to suppose an ontology beyond the one that I know exists and that I can interact with to explain the one that I know exists and that I can interact with. I don't know why the initial supposition wouldn't be that that's probably some sort of explanatorily closed or causally closed system to begin with. Why suppose there's something beyond the natural merely because there's parts of the natural we might not yet understand? So for me, the biggest hurdle I have in adopting any sort of theistic worldview or really any sort of non-naturalist worldview is that I don't see reason to go beyond the ontology that I have the ability to understand as it pertains to explaining the variety of features and what have you that ontology possesses. And I think that's probably a good place to leave it. And I do want to reiterate that this was a very, very, I really enjoyed this discussion.
Perfect.
Likewise. Yeah.
Thank you for the conclusions, both of y'all. We do have an audience vote going on for the master debater. It's got 31 votes out of 61 people watching. So I'm going to give you guys like 10 more seconds to place your votes if you want to vote for tonight's master debater. And then I'm going to call the vote. It's over 50% people that have voted so far. So we'll give this just a few seconds, and then we will go ahead and call tonight's master debater. All right, it's not moving. No one's slamming that button. It does take a minute, though, for what I say to go through on here to YouTube. Not a minute, but like 10 seconds. So, all right, we got 33 votes. That's good enough. Close enough. It's not going to change too much, I don't think. So tonight's master debater, as voted by the audience, was Leophilius with 67%. Squiddy got 33% of the vote. So Leophilius, congratulations on your master debater title for the evening.